Hi, I'm Mike Dilk and you're listening to the Relax Back UK show, the show that explores all kinds of health topics relevant to you, your family and your friends. Each week I talk to expert guests from a range of backgrounds to inform and entertain you. So please do join the Relax Back UK family and stay tuned.
Hi, and thank you for joining me on the Relax Back UK show. Two guests today, both talking about sleep.
When we're in this busy state, sleep becomes the first thing that we tend to sacrifice, even though we know it is the foundation for good mental and physical health.
Dr Ritz Birah is a consultant psychologist who helps people who suffer with problems sleeping. And today in particular, she covers the clocks going back an hour and what effects that may have. Then it's CEO of the Mental Health Foundation, and he is Mark Rowland, who talks about the link between sleep and mental health.
I think it's a problem that the people that we hold up in society as being high achievers, we've also associated with their ability to have less sleep, and all the evidence shows that that's damaging for their physical and mental health.
So please do join me for a great show. Thank you. So my first question to Dr Ritz Birah was, how many people suffer from poor sleep in the UK, and does the clock going back make it worse?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, isn't it? Because sleep in the UK is not great. We've not got a great culture with it. And a new survey that's been done by Panda London revealed how actually the clock changes are impacting people's sleep. So 2/3 of Brits say that the clock changes messes with their sleep, with the under 35s really feeling the impact of it the most. And we've got some top UK sleep personalities, which they also did with this research, which I thought was really interesting. So the first is the restless snoozer. That's about 16% are saying that they struggle to switch off at night, often tossing and turning. And what I really see that as is the brain is an autopilot. It's not switched off, and all those thoughts are just intruding.
Are these associated with SAD, this seasonally? Well, actually, what does SAD stand for?
Seasonal affective disorder. Yeah, I mean, what seasonal affective disorder is a type of depression which is reduced to the daylight that becomes reduced between the autumn and the spring. So, of course, it is going to have an impact on what happens to people's sleep, and what happens to their mood in general. We tend to see people having low mood, loss of pleasure, they're oversleeping, they're feeling fatigued, they're socially withdrawing, and they're having difficulty concentrating. And the reason that is, what's going on in our brains as this is all happening is that low light means that we're getting less retinal stimulation. So we're getting less serotonin, which is our happy hormone. And the longer days of darkness means that we're getting melatonin, which is our sleepy hormone, secreted for longer.
Okay.
And so when all of this happens, our circadian rhythm is going out of sync. And that's really important, is because light is the master controller of our circadian rhythm. So those lower levels of serotonin, that higher melatonin, tired, we're unmotivated, and those darker days mean that our brain is like queuing into that winter hibernation mode of conserve energy.
My thought here is, this is nothing new. The human race, if you like, have been putting up with this for thousands of years. Days get longer and days get shorter. And surely, evolution must have come up with a plan to deal with it, really, hasn't it? It's not like it suddenly started happening.
No, but I think we're just having more conversations, aren't we, about mental health and with people's sleep. And I think, the UK has a bit of a sleep culture issue because we are, even though, yes, we are evolving, but we're also glorifying being busy, and rest feels indulgent. So many people are, relying on that caffeine to get through all that late night scrolling. Tech is having such a deprecating, impact on our sleep. And as the research is showing, 1 in 3 adults are chronically sleep deprived, yet when we're in this busy state, sleep becomes the first thing that we tend to sacrifice, even though we know it is the foundation for good mental and physical health.
Yeah. So we need to be very protective of our sleep. Let's just go back to this SAD thing again, if we can.
Sure.
Quite a few people are diagnosed with it in the UK. Do we know how many?
Yeah, so I think it's almost 1 in 10, so about 9% have an official diagnosis of it. And
God, that's enormous. So 1 in 10 people have gone to the GP and then come away with a diagnosis of SAD?
Yes, that's
Wow.
right. And 1 in 3, which is even higher, believe that they suffer from SAD.
Okay. What can we do about it? I mean, I've heard all these lamp things. What are they? Do they work?
Yes, so light therapy or lamp therapy can be a fantastic way to get that natural daylight. So what we're looking for is about a lamp that gives you, these special lamps give you about 10,000 lux. And we should be really in front of that for about 30 minutes each morning. So to give you an idea, on like an overcast day, we get anywhere between 1 to 5,000 lux. On a full day of daylight, we get anywhere between 10 to 25,000. And when we're in direct sunlight, when we've got those gorgeous summer months and those blue skies, it's anywhere between 32 to 130. So getting that light, because if we have that sensitivity to light, is really important to help with the daily routine and to re-anchor that circadian rhythm. Other things that people can be doing is going and speaking to their GP. So if you find that, some of those symptoms that I've talked about, if they have been prevalent for more than 2 weeks, absolutely go and speak to your GP about that, where you might either be given appropriate medication and you might be referred to CBT for seasonal affective disorder, or CBT for sleep. And that's where you're really starting to learn the importance of sleep hygiene, what's happening to your body, and learning some fantastic tools to help you regulate and gain control of your sleep.
So when you say fantastic tools, you're just talking about good sleep habits, are you? Or is it a bit more complicated than that?
Yeah, well, sleep hygiene. So really understanding how that all impacts itself. So cognitive behavioral therapy is understanding how our thoughts impact our moods, which impact our behaviors. So when somebody can understand their own cycle and start to break that cycle, that can be a way of regaining control. Because often, when people are struggling with their sleep, they'll have anxious thoughts such as, I'll never sleep. And we do something called cognitive reframing, where we challenge those anxious sleep thoughts and we replace them with something that's more compassionate, more helpful to us. It doesn't add on that pressure, such as, resting is still restorative. So even if I'm not asleep, even if I'm just resting, that's still restorative for me.
Okay. You mentioned drugs. Is that antidepressants? That sounds pretty drastic to help with sleep.
That's for people, I would say, with struggling with seasonal affective disorder. And again, if people are struggling with insomnia and just not getting restorative sleep and they need that reset, it could be something that they discuss with their GP to help them to get that reset. Because when we're not getting enough sleep, we know that it does impact our mental and our physical states.
Sure. All right. So we've sort of spoken about some quite serious issues, potentially going to the doctor and getting CBT, drugs, this sort of thing. Perhaps it might be, perhaps we should have done this first off, talk about some simple things that everyone can do to just help them get to sleep before things get sort of too bad. And I know in the past you've given sort of quirky but effective sleep advice. What sort of things do you suggest to people?
Yeah, I mean, as a psychologist, and I specialize in habit formation, I really focus on consistency and cues. So we'll get to those quirky ones. But I would say start with keeping a fixed wake time, because the brain loves predictability. And even on the weekends, keep that wake time within an hour. And then at night, build in that wind down window. So 30 minutes of low stimulation without a screen, doing something that's going to signal to the body, I feel safe, I'm ready to go to sleep, because we sleep when we feel safe. And journaling can be a really fantastic way to clear that mind of clutter because it helps shift the brain from those racing thoughts to actually start preparing for bed. And so some techniques that I like to do, and I find very helpful, some techniques that I've taught my patients as well. So one is humming. And the way that we do that is because we carry so much tension in our facial area, humming can activate the vagus nerve, which we know reduces stress, improves your mental health, improves your physical health as well.
Does humming really do that? I mean, the vagus nerve is pretty deep, isn't it?
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I on the show, I had a neurosurgeon actually who had developed an implant that will stimulate the vagus nerve to help with rheumatoid arthritis. And I actually asked him about humming and singing, and he said, well, you know, there might be an element of truth, but it's pretty deep in your neck. And he wasn't that convinced that humming might help, or singing.
I think, the research there is showing that humming can activate the vagus nerve. And so, you know, I always say, try it for yourself. You know, think of a time where you're feeling a little bit stressed, you know, up to a level of 6 out of 10. Try a humming technique and notice what it does to your physiological state. Does it relax it?
Give it a go. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, we're trying to move from the sympathetic nervous system, where we're in that fight or flight mode, to the parasympathetic nervous system, where we're in that rest and digest mode. So humming, and this is a particular one that I like, is humming the tune Happy Birthday to You whilst your mouth is open and you're moving your tongue in a clockwise direction. So not only is it activating the vagus nerve, but it releases that tension in your jaw and your neck as well.
Well, I'm going to see if we can get a bit of audience participation. So if people are listening here, I'm going to suggest they try it. Now, I'm going to try it. You can tell me because the description sounds a bit difficult actually to me. So I'm going to try and hum this Happy Birthday and move my tongue clockwise. Should my tongue be sticking out or in?
Stick it out.
Stick it out. Okay. So you can see me.
I can see you. So start at the top.
Right. Here we go. All right. I'm going to stop there. Did that sound kind of like you expected it to sound?
Yep. And it looked like it too. And how does your jaw feel?
Well, okay, I wasn't doing it for terribly long, but it felt all right. I don't feel particularly different. How long would you suggest people do this for?
I would do the whole song and take your time with it, you know, so it might sound something like this, like so you're really taking your time with it, you're concentrating on it. With any of these techniques that we do, we're going to do them with intention. So if we're saying like, oh, you know what, that's not going to work for me, already you've primed your brain to believe that's not going to work. So there's no point doing it. You know, I'm going to give a mix of techniques here, but if you're open to it and you think, do you know what, let me give this a go. I have struggled with my sleep. I'm going to try that. See what happens. Just because it works for some people doesn't mean it has to work for you.
Sure. Okay. Anything else you can suggest?
Yeah, so another one is gratitude before bedtime. We know that when we go through gratitude, when we think about our gratitude, again, it lowers the cortisol in our body, which is our stress hormone. And what I say to people is, you know, from a journaling perspective, we kind of encourage 3 moments of gratitude in the day, or 3 things that you made you happy or that you felt proud of. But if you're using it as a technique to fall asleep, I say actually try and get to 20, because most people report back to me and say afterwards, gosh, I don't even get to 20. I've actually fallen asleep like, you know, halfway through or 3/4 of the way through. And if your mind is wandering, which it will, just keep bringing yourself back to the next one. You can even count it on your fingers as you go. It's going to activate your brain's reward system. It's going to increase your dopamine levels and again activate that parasympathetic nervous system, allowing you to go into a more restful state.
And so your patients have reported back saying that this is, you know, helps a lot of people. Helps a lot.
Yes, and it's actually tools that I try myself. Sometimes I have those racing thoughts before bed where I'm struggling to switch off, or I've just not had restorative sleep for a few days. And these are techniques that, as a psychologist, I try myself. And then the final one is a body scan, and there's two different ways to do this. So with a body scan, you start with your toes, and you move all the way up to the top of your head, where you're turning off each part of your body. And you can also do it including progressive muscle relaxation. So what that would mean is that you first start by clenching those toes, holding it for 5 seconds, and then releasing it. And then as you do, you're saying goodnight, toes, and you move to your ankles, tensing them, releasing your thighs, your stomach, your back, your shoulders, your face, all the way until you get to the top of your head, and then your whole body at the same time. And again, what we're doing there is we're moving the body from a state of tension to then a state of relaxation, switching off each body part and signaling safety to the body that it's time to go to sleep.
Okay. I mean, that I can imagine that being quite useful if I'm having trouble sleeping, for sure. Although I must admit, I'm very lucky. It seems to just take me a couple of minutes to fall asleep. Yeah, it's not a problem for me. Although I do have friends that have real difficulty sleeping, and it's very worrying for them. I guess any discussion of sleep isn't complete until we've spoken about mobile phones, computers, the blue light problem. Yeah. Now, is the blue light thing? Is it the actual what we're doing on our mobile phones, and so our mind is whirring away, thinking about messages and tweets and all this stuff, or is it actually the light that comes out of the screen, or a mixture of the two?
I'd say it's probably a mixture of the two. What are you absorbing before bedtime? Who are you absorbing? How is it making you feel? And then also what the blue light is actually going to be doing to your brain and your body. So when we look at what's happening to the brain and body, what we see is that we've got a part of our brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And when that receives that blue light input, it's going to interpret it as daytime. So if you're using that blue light at, let's say, 9 o'clock at night, you're telling your brain, actually, it's maybe still 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so because it's getting that signal, it's going to suppress melatonin, your sleepy hormone. And so then your body is not preparing itself for sleep. And even 30 minutes, let's say, of scrolling can delay that melatonin release by up to 90 minutes, is what the research says. And so it keeps that body in alert mode. And so the result of that then is it takes longer to fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
The sleep ends up being actually a lot lighter, and your REM cycles are shortened. And that's important because we need REM sleep for memory consolidation, for emotional processing, and just allowing the brain to restore itself.
Okay. When people have mentioned this in the past, I've often wondered, what about Kindles? Because quite a lot of reading before you go to sleep is seen as a good thing. And I quite often read a book. I do have a Kindle, and occasionally I have read a Kindle. Do Kindles give us this blue light, or is reading a Kindle going to be okay?
I think there's different versions of Kindles, aren't there? Because my one, the one that I use, mimics a book quite well in terms of it's not light itself. And you can adjust the lighting too, and you can go into dark mode. So I think when if you are going to use a screen, putting it into dark mode, or I think it's even amber mode, that mimics that sunset light that we would be getting from our environment.
Okay. Oh, can you do that on phones and other things?
Yeah, you can put your phone into dark mode, or I think there's like red mode, amber mode, different modes that you can even just set it that it automatically comes on.
All right. Well, that's probably a good thing to do in those. If you can't drag yourself away from your mobile phone or whatever it might be, putting it in those modes might be a good kind of halfway house.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's about not going for huge changes and big leaps drastically, because the likelihood is that they're going to fall by the wayside eventually, but about having, as I said, tiny tweaks and consistency and cues, something you think, yeah, these are some changes that I'm going to try, I'm going to make, and actually I think I'm able to implement them.
Okay. All this is great advice. If people are listening and thinking, yeah, I'd like a good resource to go and look at some other stuff about sleep advice, that sort of thing, have you got a good resource that you can suggest to people, please?
Yes, so there's the NHS website Every Mind Matters, which has great resources for sleep and mental health. Then there is the Sleep Charity UK, which offers lots of practical tools. Mind UK as well has some great advice and tips on there for seasonal affective disorder. If you'd like to try the journaling, then please sign up to Reflect with Dr Ritz. And then as well, Panda UK do some amazing eco-friendly bedding that can also support better sleep. And it's something I use as well, bamboo bedding.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to chat. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike.
Mark Rowland is the CEO of the Mental Health Foundation, and I asked him, is it a myth that we need 8 hours good quality sleep? Because plenty of people seem to exist on less, and famously, Margaret Thatcher said she only needed 4 hours sleep a night.
Well, I think that's the problem, isn't it? I think culturally, we've made a bit of a fetish of, and we've celebrated people like Margaret Thatcher who didn't get much sleep. And we put a cultural status on managing your life without getting the sufficient sleep that we need. I think there's a lot of sleep stigma out there that we need to challenge. When young people get a lie-in and have an extra hour's sleep, we should see that. We should value that like they've just gone for a run for an hour, but we don't. We associate people getting extra sleep with being lazy or somehow being feckless, rather than them taking a very responsible and important measure to protect their long-term physical and mental health, which is what that is. So I think it's a problem that the people that we hold up in society as being high achievers, we've also associated with their ability to have less sleep, and all the evidence shows that that's damaging for their physical and mental health.
Okay. Well, so that's quite topical for me at the moment, because I've got a 15-year-old son, and it's half term right now. Yeah. And I'm quite sure he's still in bed asleep, and he's been sleeping a lot. And he should also be revising for GCSEs. So I've been resisting the temptation to get him out of bed early to suggest he starts revising. So and he gets up kind of when he gets up. So if I say I was to kick him out of bed early before he's ready, if you have a teen that is troubled due to lack of sleep, or a teen with lack of sleep, can that lead to an adult being troubled due to lack of sleep in later life?
Well, I think all the patterns and the habits that we take when we're younger are really important, that we set healthy habits. And I think it's a big missing gap for young people, that we're not talking about the importance of sleep. We're not telling them about its foundational nature, and they're going into adulthood thinking sleep is an optional extra, which can be sacrificed at whim if the demands of working life or social life demand it. So looking at the school system, it's a really big question about why school starts are happening earlier and earlier for young people, when we know that actually many people's cognitive ability is actually greatly impaired if they haven't had enough sleep, and also in the early hours. So we haven't structured society. So in terms of your 15-year-old son, I think parents need to be asking, first of all, if you want your kids to flourish and be at their best, they will need to be able to get sufficient sleep. So it's worth asking how how much sleep they're getting, what the quality of that sleep is getting, and really ask them like what would help them get the sleep that they need. And that I think is part of being of a good parenting, but it doesn't happen very often. I know for my 18-year-old son, sleep is often the first thing that goes when the pressures of life start coming in, and kids need protection from that.
All right, I shall take that on board because, he's got it all to come. He's got his GCSEs in a few months' time, A-levels, and life unfolding after that. Okay.
One of the things that's really interesting about a lack of sleep and its effect on the brain is that it has the same effect. It affects the same parts of the brain that trauma affects. So if you have a traumatic incident in your life, it affects the prefrontal cortex, which helps you govern all your executive functions, helps you make rational decisions. It's the part of our brain that's been underdeveloped evolutionary wise, but helps us assess informations and process and reflect. So our reflection center, it's like our control center. But it also affects the amygdala and the hippocampus, which helps us create memory. So all of those things are affected by trauma, but also are greatly dilapidated or affected by consistent lack of sleep. So it's really interesting how much effect sleep has on the brain, on the core functions we need for emotional regulation and cognitive ability. And honestly, the impact of a lack of sleep in your ability to retain information, concentrate and focus, which is all the things you need as a young person to perform academically, sleep is the biggest factor in that, Mike. So I think it's a false economy for people to burn the midnight oil and think that they are studying hard but not getting the sleep they need.
Interesting. What you said earlier in that little bit leads on nicely to this next question I was thinking about, which is probably an unfair question, so I'm just warning you. Does lack of sleep lead to sort of mental health issues, or mental health issues lead to a lack of sleep? Or is it kind of, is that a bit too simplistic? I imagine it being a bit more complicated than that.
Well, it's a great question. And I would say that in all cases, mental health problems are multifactorial. It's never just one thing. It's really clear, though, that high levels of stress, high levels of anxiety, depression can lead to both a lack of sleep, but also can lead to a lack of energy or lethargy and hypersomnia, so getting too much sleep. So there is definitely a relationship between the two. But I would say that the first step is that the environment in our lives causes pressure, and that pressure builds up and it affects our sleep, and then that poor quality of sleep over a longer period of time is going to affect our ability to bounce back and process and recover. And what we talk about is healthy emotional regulation. Like, are you able to contain the stress, the anxiety, the frustration, the anger? And poor mental health happens when you're in a position where consistently you're not able to contain those negative emotions, and they start limiting your life and impairing your life. And poor sleep just kicks away one of the key regulating mechanisms, probably the most important regulating mechanism for managing your emotions. So it is bidirectional, it's chicken or egg, but at the end of the day, it's absolutely foundational. And that's why, Mike, we were stunned to find in the survey that we've recently done that almost 40% of people have never thought about how to improve the quality of their sleep. It's a major problem. We're looking around in lots of different ways about how to be happy, how to be fulfilled, how to achieve our potential. And over here is sitting a big prize, which is how do we sleep, which is so it's hard to overestimate the impact in terms of not just mental but also physical health. And yeah, many of us.
You're saying that's a potential easy win
Exactly.
or easy-ish win.
And it's like hiding in plain sight. It's an easy-ish win. It's not easy to improve your sleep, but if you've not thought about it and you've not reflected on it, then there could be some low-hanging fruit that could dramatically increase the sleep you're getting and improve almost every facet of your working, relational, personal life as well. So there's a lot of gains to be had.
Okay, so that's worth seriously thinking about and getting those gains. I was wondering, because mental health is often sort of, there are lots of different mental health issues that are often just bound together as sort of one big mental health. And I was wondering if different sorts of mental health issues might be affected by sleep more or less. So that you mentioned one earlier in this chat, depression. So does depression and sleep go hand in hand more than other mental health issues? What's the situation there?
Yeah, I think there is a difference in the way in which the presentation of an experience of mental ill health will affect your sleep. So, as I said earlier on, I think depression is interesting in the sense that it can lead to hypersomnia, not insomnia. So it can increase levels of a lack of energy throughout the day, which actually means that you're not able to recoup or get the regenerative benefits of sleep in the way that you need, and that the impact of the depression is that it strips the motivational centers of your mind and of your will, and I think that is very different from post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, or levels of anxiety, which stimulate the amygdala part of the brain, which leads you to wake up in the middle of the night, and you're perfectly alert. So they do have, and for example, bipolar disorder, when you're in the mania phase, will obviously give you much greater levels of alertness versus the depression phase, which will effectively impact the quality of the sleep that you're having and disrupt the ability for you to get the restorative gains that sleep offers. So there's a range of impacts, and that's why it's worth understanding if there is a pre-existing mental health condition, your approach to how to get the best from your sleep will be different as well.
Okay, and that's the sort of thing that an individual would potentially need help with. I mean, you can't. This is hard to self-diagnose and then figure out what you need to do to get better sleep.
That's right, and I think it is something that I think is worth reading about, getting advice from a doctor. And obviously, if you're, any pre-existing physical condition is a big predeterminant of poorer sleep as well. So if you're experiencing any chronic pain, or if you're experiencing any other form of physical disability, that has a big impact on sleep as well. And then the medication that you might be on for those conditions, or any medication that you're on for mental health problems, they also have, as a side effect, often a consequence on sleep. So it is about weighing up for individuals the range of factors that are going on in one's life. But I think what we would say is that as you're discussing your health with your doctor, physical and mental, the consequences of how do you optimize and get the best from sleep should be part of that conversation. Sleep shouldn't be sacrificed on the altar because it's so important for all other health outcomes. And I think what we're saying is that sleep needs to be prioritized in the conversation. Really the first one, which is saying it's the foundation of mental and physical health. So how can I protect it?
Yeah. And are you finding that sleep is becoming more and more of an issue? Has it always been a problem, or is it becoming more of a problem now? Are more and more people suffering from lack of sleep which brings on mental health issues, or because of mental health issues? You're nodding your head. Yeah. So it seems to be getting worse.
It's both. It's both, and we're definitely seeing a rise globally in modern Western societies of a range of mental health issues and people reporting. And part of that is about increased openness about people struggling with mental health. So that there's been so much suppressed mental health distress and struggle that was never named as such. But if you look at the studies around, so we globally, we're definitely seeing a sustained increase above just increased openness, especially for young people. And in the UK, there is the adult psychiatric morbidity study, which is done every 7 years, which tracks the prevalence of mental health problems. And they've just reported earlier this year. And again, it's seen another very significant rise of people reporting mental health problems. So that's not going to help people sleep. But then if you look at the other side of it and look at the average sleep, in the 1940s, the average amount of sleep that people were getting was just under 9 hours. And now it's just under 7. And so
that's a big difference in really that long, is it? I mean,
no. And so part of like the nighttime economy, the fact that to sleep well, you need 3 things consistently. You need to be in a fairly cool temperature. You need it to be dark, and you need it to be quiet. And modern society has not delivered those 3 things consistently. The roads are busier, everything is noisier, everything is lighter. And I'm not sure global warming can be attributed to poorer sleep, but we are. But certainly on the light and the noise, there's a huge amount of that pollution in modern societies that is contributing to the poorer quality of sleep.
I must admit, I thought you were going to say another factor there, and I was going to ask: is it all due to social media and mobile phones? Yeah. Is that the big evil? Get rid of that, and we've solved the problem.
It's a great question. There's definitely evidence that stimulating the brain just in the hour before bedtime and the sort of blue light concern. But I think I wouldn't say if you're I think there's something at the root of it's a contributory factor, Mike. It's made things worse, but it's not the only one. And when you're looking at the rise of poor mental health globally, that unregulated social media is one of those. To be able to give unvetted social media the opportunity to influence us in such dramatic ways is not going to help. So we would say
it's also not going to go anywhere. Like, the genie is out of the bottle, so we can't really do anything about that one, probably.
Well, no, I wouldn't agree, because what is damaging is unregulated social media. So that's social media companies being able to not have a duty of care to their customers. And we have just passed legislation 2 years ago in the UK, which was around the Online Safety Act. We should be able to devise a system where social media use is where there is a duty of care, and where it's properly regulated and enforced, and where there are proper penalties for social media exploiting users' mental and emotional health.
So a factor, but not the overriding one. An important factor, but not the overriding one. Okay, that's good. That's interesting. Because I must admit, I thought you might well be of a different opinion. So that's interesting to chat about that. There's an awful lot we've spoken about. Now, if people are listening and they are worried about their sleep patterns, or maybe the sleep patterns of a family member, child, whatever, what is the first thing they should do? I mean, should they go see their GP? Should they? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things they could do, but what can they do that is most useful?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is I think moving from autopilot to being your own sort of Sherlock Holmes, an investigator. What is happening with my sleep, and how could I improve it? And putting it as something that we want to proactively address, I think is the number one thing. And then so we would encourage people to do a sleep audit and to understand what is happening. We one of our tips that we've just republished is to do a sleep diary and to start noticing. So much in mental health is about noticing. It's about making connections. It's about trying to find the cause and effect for you personally. And that skill, that actual emotional and mental skill is undervalued. And so I think the first thing is to trace, like, what's happening, when are you sleeping well, what's disrupting the sleep. Then probably the first thing to do once you've done that audit is to say, what's a good routine for me, what's my sleep routine that's going to give me the increased chances of getting a good sleep. And I think from there you can then run your own experiment on yourself and then take it from there. And if depending on the level of disturbance and the frequency, so how much are you not sleeping and how often is that happening? If that's happening a lot, then I think it is worth then consulting your GP to say, well, what kind of support could I get? But there's a lot that can be done before that when in the preventative space.
And are GPs generally helpful in this area? Because we all hear GPs are incredibly busy. Are there things they can do, referrals they can do to other places in the NHS?
There is good evidence around there is good evidence around both clinical CBT for sleep and products that can be, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, Mike, which is helping us to go through a process that draws us closer to sleep and reduces the stress response. There is some melatonin, and there's good evidence. There's some helpful evidence around drugs that can help us, but it just, we would recommend that there's a lot that's, before you go to that stage, there's a lot that can help on sleep hygiene that people are leaving on the table. So do all of those things, first, and for me, my own sleep journey has also involved doing therapy, because I noticed that there were particular things that were causing me stress every week, the same thing every week, the same pattern. And actually, what's made the biggest impact for my sleep is actually talking through that with a therapist and undoing that trigger. And suddenly it's allowed me to disrupt the pattern and enable me to sleep so much better. So it may not be a GP, it may be a referral into talking therapies, because it's really about what is it that's causing the disturbance where the mind is not able to stop and recharge, because it's on that fight and flight mode.
So if I think maybe a final question might be a good source. We've spoken about a lot of things here, but if someone would like to, go to a source of information, which, they can go down a list of things to think about, things to try, and it's good, sensible, but simple information. Can you name some good sources?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with some of the leading sleep experts in the country, Colin Espy at Oxford, and we've produced a sleep guide with helpful tips, and we've also put lots of different links in there to products and advice lines that people can use. So go to mentalhealth.org.uk, which is the Mental Health Foundation. Search on sleep, and you'll find our guide, and that's really supposed to be a one-stop shop to start your own sleep journey and the journey to improving the quality and quantity of the sleep that you're getting.
Okay, that sounds like a very good advice and a good source. So thank you very much indeed for taking the time to chat, Mark. It's much appreciated.
I've loved it. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you very much to the guests on this week's show, and they were Dr Ritz Birah, consultant psychologist, and Mark Rowland, CEO of the Mental Health Foundation, both talking about sleep. Thank you to you for listening, and please do remember, if you like the show, why not check out my book, Cut the Crap, Ask the Questions That Matter About Your Health. It's largely written using information and thoughts from previous high caliber guests on the show, so what's not to like? And lastly, Have a healthy week. Until next week.
Thanks for listening to the Relax Back UK show. Join me, Mike Dilk, again next week for more fascinating interviews and chat. If you're listening to the podcast version, please subscribe, like, and share it with your family and friends. And have a healthy week. Until next week.